This is Into the Blue, a podcast about becoming an officer with the Waterloo Regional Police Service. For each episode, we start with a theme and bring you two perspectives, one from an officer in training and another from an officer in the community. In this episode, it's all about putting all that new knowledge to work out in the community. I'll welcome back our digital content coordinator, Mark. Hi, Mark.
Hi. Thanks for having me back, Rachel.
So what do we have planned for this episode?
So in this episode, we are going to check back in with Elias as he returns home to Waterloo Region for some local training and his first few shifts on the road with a coach officer. And then we'll join Amanda as she takes on some more calls in the community. So just as a quick recap, when you're hired with the service, you start full-time with pay with a group of new officers that we call a class. As a class, you spend the first 6 weeks here at Waterloo with our training unit, and then you go to Elmer, Ontario for police college for 11 weeks. And then you come back for 7 additional weeks of local training before you see your first shifts on the road under a coach officer. Elias has just returned to Waterloo. He's moved back home, comes into work every day to police headquarters for the post-Ontario Police College training. OPC has wrapped up. Is this where your training wraps up?
No. So we came back to Waterloo and there's post-OPC. And you come here and you further conduct training. You apply in scenarios. You learn more detailed information.
So Rachel, how would you describe how training is different for that post-OPC versus the Ontario Police College training?
So when you're at Ontario Police College, you're learning the general kind of authorities and rules and, kind of ways of training. When you come back to Waterloo after to do your post-Ontario Police College training, it's more specific to Waterloo. So there's just certain ways that we do things here that we just kind of tweak the training that's been learned at Ontario Police College to make it, suited to our region. For example, IRD training, you learn kind of generally at Ontario Police College. And then when you come here, we learn a lot more specifics with regard to IRD training and how we would be responding to those situations.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say that each service might have a unique way of doing things. They're all doing the same thing, and just maybe they do it slightly differently. I mean, whether that's the software they use in the cruiser or maybe a process even behind something.
The post-OPC is different from OPC training because you become to your specific location of what the needs are. How do things run at Waterloo? Every service is different in how they operate, but how is it done at Waterloo? Yes, you went to OPC and they taught you all the generics, the general thing. At Waterloo, how does it work? Then you go back on the road, and then you come back for another 2 weeks of enhanced training, where you even dive deeper now because you got the road experience, and they'll chat with you more about different units, different investigative services that are here that we can start utilizing for calls.
We are going to be breaking down each of these today, okay? Today's the bread and butter.
So I jumped in on one of Elias's post-OPC classes. This is the one of them learning more advanced techniques and gaining a certification and kind of looking for and recognizing impaired drivers.
Watch your foot, yeah. But very well, okay? The counting's important too.
Not only were they building on the basics of OPC, but they were introducing them to the physical tools and processes used here at WRPS specifically.
What I want the other people to do is kind of be back where Paul is. Okay, don't be standing in our backstop, but kind of be back.
This was also another class where recruits learned how to respond to high-risk calls as a team. Our instructors built on the basics from Ontario Police College, teaching them the approach used here at Waterloo. The approach they're learning here now is the same approach that every officer in the rest of our service will use.
No, he's at your side, right? So what would we do then? We would tell...
So up until this point, as a constable in training, you're technically still a civilian. You haven't received your badge yet. That's when this special moment comes in. It's small, but an important ceremony that happens at the end of kind of that post-OPC training. It's a few weeks after you get back from Elmer, Ontario, and it happens before you take your first shifts on the road under the guidance of a coach officer. Practically speaking, it's giving you the police powers granted to you in the Community Safety and Policing Act that ordinary citizens don't necessarily have. It's the tools and authorities you need to do the job.
Once you come back to your service and you complete all the training, there's a badge ceremony of just you and your classmates and the friends and family. the police chief, all the senior leadership, and there are also some guests. I know for ours was very special because the same day, Premier Ford was also here with the Solicitor General, and they assisted the service in opening up the new Central Division at 200 Frederick Street.
I want to congratulate each and every one of you in the highest level of public service. You know, as you go out day in and day out, and you serve the public with Waterloo Region, you're going to have good days.
Rachel, do you remember your badge ceremony?
I do. My badge ceremony was in the gym at headquarters.
Very nice.
Very fancy.
Classy. Very classy,
fancy.
yeah.
And I remember being really nervous because you have to march in, just like your march past at OPC, but this one is with your, only the Waterloo officers. So it's a smaller group. And I just really didn't want to make a mistake with the marching. That's probably what I remember the most about it, was getting handed my badge and being nervous about not making a mistake marching.
Perfect. Sounds like, key important factors about the badge ceremony. I think Elias would agree with you. I mean, he had an extra layer of being nervous since he had to do the speech in front of Premier Ford, but he also felt it was a pretty special experience.
It was an awesome experience because that's truly what you worked so hard for. That was the moment when you receive your badge. That is just an extraordinary feeling. I know for me, personally, because I was a class leader of my class, I had to give a speech. And at that time, because Premier Ford was there and Solicitor General, the guy who I used to always watch on YouTube giving those press conferences about COVID, now here I am giving a speech in front of him. But it was really cool giving that speech because I truly was genuinely wholehearted sharing my feeling about being with this class, of the camaraderie. But right after that, you get your badge, and the badge, that feeling, the medal in your hand, it's like that wallet that has a special badge in there, your warrant card, and the photo that they use in there. It's the first day that you enter for your background checks photo. So you really see the entire journey of all your hard work unfold right in front of you, which is so awesome.
There's a really specific moment that people always tell me about. It's the moment that you have a quick second kind of to look down, whether it's during your ceremony or right after, and you see that badge in your hand.
Now having that badge and looking down, and I remember the first time feeling the badge, the texture of it. I've always wanted to grow up to be a cop, and here I am with a badge. But it's a tremendous feeling, but you just know that this career, yes, you finish your training and stuff, but it's continuous learning for 30 years. You know it's not going to stop.
Once again, thank you for being a part of our ceremony today. Let's have a final round of applause for Class 112.
And now after this, I would go and set up the car. So internal checks, make sure nothing was left from previous shift. And then check lights, sirens, make sure the car's up to par to be on the road. Exactly.
So generally within a week of that badge ceremony, you're walking into the division for your first shift out in the community with a coach officer. Rachel, how would you kind of describe the role of that coach officer?
Your coach officer it's really one of your first mentors within the police service. It's a coach officer is someone that you're going to ride with for about 3 months. And when you first start with that coach officer, they're really showing you everything that they're doing on a call. You're kind of sitting in the passenger seat and, you get to observe. You have learned a lot of information, but you're kind of seeing it play out in real life, which is really important. And then gradually you switch roles. And you become more of the primary officer, talking to everybody at the calls and taking the lead. And your coach officer is there as a support to make sure you're making the right decisions and to be there, obviously, for officer safety as well. So it's really, everyone really kind of, develops a very close relationship with their coach officer because you are going through, a few months together, riding 12-hour shifts. You really get to know each other, and you are, relying on this person to kind of guide and mold you as a police officer, as you kind of find your feet as a police officer as you are going to be, because we're all, we all are a little bit different.
So right now we're in the Duffer room, basement of the station, and then we're going to enter the parking garage to grab our cruiser. Thank you.
Oh, within a week after you receive your badge, you're at your divisions and you're out there on the road.
What's the feeling at that point?
Oh, the feeling. I remember going down the first time. Before you actually go, you get to meet your platoon. You go for a briefing in the morning, and you meet your platoon mates, your staff sergeant, and your sergeants, and you bring donuts and coffees. They'll love it. It's a good impression. So the first time, well, you're with your coaching officer, you're in the passenger seat, but it was good. I do remember it was sunny, and I'm like, oh, I got to bring out the shades going out of this. I had a really good coach who's now a detective. Learned a lot from him. And I remember just saying that actually. I did actually say that to him. I was like, wow, I can't believe like we're just rolling out right now.
You guys know, Mark, you already tell these guys you're gonna be riding along, I guess, if you haven't figured that out. Mark's going out with Corey and Eli.
I joined Elias and his coach officer on one of his early shifts just to check to see how it was going. I think what surprised me the most, that as someone being coached, you're being thrown right into the calls. If it comes up in your area that you're responsible for, you're probably going. For a new officer, there's really a lot to think about.
Black Lululemon jacket.
10-4 Northwest 42. Okay, he's behind the building in the corner of King and James. 10-4, building at King and James.
Yeah, so when you're responding to a call and you're going there, whether it's based on priority, so sometimes it's a hot call where you don't have much time to think, you're going lights and sirens, you're looking at the road, pedestrians, right, rules of the road, you're stopping, making sure we arrive safe, because if we don't arrive safe, then all the resources has to come to us, and we don't want it to, for one, right?
Remember, this isn't a scenario-based training anymore. This is real issues faced by real members of the community. When Elias shows up, there is nothing about him that says he's in training. They are looking at you as a real officer, looking for solutions, just as they would for any other officer. As a seasoned officer has been through a lot and probably has some routine with their approaches and a lot of applicable knowledge right at hand. But it's different for Elias. Every call is testing his training and his knowledge.
Alpha Victor Tango 214.
So before we go out, I usually just look at the
CPICs?
see what
What is North 11 Delta? What's your time?
So going there, you always want to think about what could my authority be here? What type of situation am I going in? And you thinking about that, you're actually thinking of your training throughout, of what happened since day one. What are the police authorities? If I'm looking at a vehicle in front of me and the camera picks up a suspended driver, okay, so we're going to pull this guy over. If it is the same registered owner driving the car who is suspended, what's my arrest authority? What's my authorities? What can I do? If it's not, if the driver is not the registered owner, then what do I do? Right? So you always want to think about that. Or I know we responded to a call for a prowler near the University District. What's our authority of searching houses if we think he's in there? You're constantly reverting back to your training, whether you're thinking about it, whether you're in the call or you're arresting someone or you're searching someone. What are the different safety mechanics you need to make sure there's no weapons, no escape, evidence tampered as well. All that's going in you, and yeah, you're with the coach, but at the end of the day, the more that you're progressing in your training out on the road, the more they're gonna be taking steps back to ensure you can do this on your own when you're officially signed off.
Whoever else is coming to assist me with that, we're gonna have to start clearing these people off at least the lower floors until they can determine where the fire is.
10-4. What is any other unit for you to attend that night?
If your only understanding of police comes from TV and what you see in the movies, you might be thinking a police officer is all action all the time. While any situation could turn into a dynamic situation at a moment's notice, by and large, there's quite a spread on the work you're going to be required to do as an officer.
So I remember on New Year's Day, actually, New Year's Day, it was cold. And that's when the snow finally hit and stuff, right? They missed Christmas. We responded to a domestic call, and the subject was actually still in the house, the victim, the wife. She escaped and she went to a place of safety where she called us from. But because of the nature of the call, and we knew he was in there, there wasn't a warrant, Feeney warrant was going to be executed by the immediate partner violence team unit here. But we had to make sure we watched the house to ensure he doesn't escape. And we're making attempts for call out for arrests and stuff. Nothing's being responded to. And I remember that was a very eye-opening experience where that same night I went to buy thermal gear to wear under my uniform. So not many times where an arrest is made or you're chasing someone down. No, sometimes you just have to literally sit there and watch.
There were a few moments of his first shifts that stick out for Elias, and one which is similar for a lot of officers was his first arrest.
You know, at OPC and at Waterloo training, you train a lot of how to apply your cuffs, your handcuffs when you are arresting. You're taking someone's liberty away, like when you're putting them on. Sometimes it's, you know, they don't want those cuffs on, and sometimes they're cooperative. I had a guy who was kind of in the middle. He was verbally arguing a lot, but he was cooperative with putting his hands behind his back. But I remember taking out my handcuffs and I was actually shaking. One, it was cold. But two, I was just shaking because I'm like, okay, you're double checking everything. But when you apply those cuffs and you safety lock it and everything, you're like, oh.
As far as a male wearing a black and blue jacket, last seen running behind 168 King.
One thing I noticed while riding with Elias was how much variation in call types that came in. For the most part, the calls you are assigned start with a phone call from the community. An officer could be responding to a very calm call 1 minute and then a chaotic call the next. Rachel, when you have to paint a picture of the types of call for service that the road sees, how would you say that mix breaks down, and how is that different than, the public's perception of the job?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. There is a huge variety of calls for service that are happening. And I think sometimes the public thinks there's only maybe one or two types of things that we do. Maybe we're pulling people over, for traffic stuff, or, responding to assaults. But, we're going to domestic calls. We're going to neighbor disputes. We're going to youth complaints. We're going to animal complaints. We're going to robberies. And it's such a vast variety of jobs, of calls that are happening. And you're right. You could go from a very calm, check well-being call where you're just checking on somebody who's fine, but you just kind of have to establish that. And then the next minute you're going to, hold up alarm, right? Which is a little more high priority. So you really have to be very flexible when you're on the road, and because you never know what next call you're going to get.
And I think if you see a chaotic scene in the community, police are probably the ones responding, and often with little information. And it's a time in some of these people's lives where they're really experiencing the worst day of their life, and you're just there showing up. There are approaches that officers are trained to use in some of these really difficult situations.
Hello, what's going on? Okay, this is gonna be a trust thing. You want to trust that you're gonna be.
There's a lot of things at OPC that we learn as hooks and triggers. You often want to start off with a conversation of what was going on, ask them how they're doing. Depends if the environment allows you to do so, obviously, as well, right? Sometimes they're in the middle of psychosis and they're just being extremely angry. Or I just had my first excited delirium episode of an individual, and we're trying to restrain him, and you can see that he's talking to us. He doesn't want to do this, but his body is like he can't control it. That was one where you don't have time to do a conversation and rapport. Whereas another call of mine where we went and this person is known to be violent, that's on their record, right? So dispatch will try to give us hints and tips of before going to the call, as much information they can provide us for that time. But we were very empathetic. We just wanted to build rapport with him, to chat with him. You want to understand what they're going through.
Riding with Amanda over the course of a few shifts, it was pretty apparent that many calls for service are definitely driven by some type of underlying mental health concern. On this ride along with Amanda, we were dispatched to a call where the patient was expressing that they wanted to see a doctor, like basically as soon as we arrived.
So you want to go to the hospital tonight? Think it's going to be the right choice. I think right now you'll be safer there though for the night, and that's what.
Already, I'll bring you up to the hospital then, and then we'll go up there, and then you can talk to. We have Canadian Mental Health on the way as well, because I know
when
you
you're
wanted to chat with them.
you're stepping out of the cruise there and you're walking up to the front door, what are some of the things that you're maybe going to prioritize or you're going to talk to them about when you're walking in, or you're looking for, stuff like that?
Yeah. So especially for mental health calls, there's certain questions and information that we need, especially want to make sure that they're not a danger to themselves or other people. So for apprehending someone, it's typically an immediate danger to themselves or other people. So, for example, this guy did have a plan. So he was feeling suicidal. He did have a plan, and he said that he felt like he was going to act on it. So typically if we don't feel that there's an immediate risk, we can get Canadian Mental Health to attend and speak with them. But in this situation, because he had a plan and was feeling suicidal, we ended up taking him to the hospital.
So in this situation, the officers had a conversation with the patient to try and understand his feelings and where he was coming from. The officers also spoke with others around him to help try to build that picture to decide if he should be apprehended under the Mental Health Act. That conversation, I think, can really be a balancing act.
One, just making sure that they're okay, if they're willing to talk to us, and then just trying to stay calm and approachable so that they can feel comfortable to answer those questions, because they can be difficult and awkward questions to ask, especially surrounding mental health.
Finally, I think what I learned is that it's important to understand that no two calls, subjects, or patients, even in this situation, are the same, that each call requires its own unique approach. That's often learned through a combination of training, but also that on-the-job experience that Elias is kind of just going through right now.
Yeah, I think you have to make sure that you're going into every call without any assumptions on the people involved or the situation, because you really don't know until you get there and you actually start listening. Listening's the most important thing, right? To listen to what's actually going on for those people, and so that you can determine what the best approach is to help, help whatever mediate or solve their problem or help them, whatever the call kind of requires. We will leave Amanda and Elias there for now, and we'll check back in with them in the next episode, picking up with Elias as he ventures out for his first solo shift and officially marks the end of his training as a new officer. Mark, thanks for joining me. I'm really looking forward to what's coming up next.
Perfect. We'll do this one more time.
Into the Blue is produced by the Waterloo Regional Police Service. It is hosted by Rachel Molnar and produced, reported, and edited by Mark Arujo. Supervising Director is Sherry Greeno. Special thank you to the entire dedicated training team at the Ontario Police College, as well as the WRPS Training and Education Branch. Without their collaboration, this production would not be possible.